Hi, I'm Teresa Slavicorn, the Executive Director of Life Center, and I have been for the last 10 years in September, so that's exciting. How did I come to the Life Center? How did I end up here? That's such a great question. I always tell people on accident, but really it was God's hand. A lot of people I knew were coming to a Reigning in Life conference, and I kept hearing about it. So I went and took that class, and I loved it. It was the message that was in my heart. And then from that, I went on to take the advanced ministry training class, and eventually they asked me to come on staff, and I promptly said, "Are you crazy?" But they persisted, so I prayed, but I really prayed very half-heartedly. Because I really saw myself in the church. I love the church. I love the church body. I love the church culture. It was so my heart to be there that I didn't see myself anywhere else. Well, long story short, Carol, the executive director at that time, she asked me what my favorite verse was. And then when I told her that verse, it was the verse that Life Center's founded on, and Preach Christ Crucified. And so I was like, well, I really got to pray now for real. And so I went home, and then within a very short order, two very special verses in my life kept coming back to the surface, and I saw something different in them. And so then I knew I was supposed to be here. So really it was the hand of God bringing me to Life Center, and that's how I ended up here. And I've loved it ever since. It's been such a joy. What has the role of executive director meant? Well, I don't know if you could say this on tape, but I'm thinking work. It has been a labor of true love because I have been privileged to, one, meet so many people, and people are amazing. They're so talented. They're so gifted. I truly believe the body of Christ can minister to the body, and that every single person has a gift to share, the gift of Christ to share with another person. And being positioned to help people see that in themselves and equip and train them to be able to go out and live a life of victory, but then also share that with their neighbors. I think that's probably been one of the things that means the most to me. It's like watching your children grow up and go out and do life. It's so rewarding. And the reward it's kind of weird because it's theirs in the end. And it's very life-giving, and I think that's probably been the thing I've most enjoyed, and it's so spectacular. People are just amazing. Good question. How did God surprise me? First of all, the whole thing was a great big Shanghai. My God. I only volunteered to be a discipler, not the executive director. So I always think about God tricked me into this. But of course, he knew that I would love it so much, and it was for my benefit. How has he surprised me the most? He's made me brave. I never thought I could do these types of things. I barely got through high school. I had a lot to overcome and still do. But I think he surprised me in causing me to believe him, and knowing that if I didn't believe him, that there were people's lives that might not get to hear this message of Christ as your life and experience God's love and his freedom. And so wanting people to have that so much, I had to be brave and do brave things. And so one of the brave things was eventually coming to this building that we're in now. And that was quite a surprise to me. I saw this building in my head for probably 7 years, and I drew it on a piece of paper many, many times. And then when I came into this office, everything I drew was here, almost identical. And it made me brave that God showed me ahead of time, and it gave me the courage to trust him. And so I think that's it. And that in all those little things and all the special encouragements from people, that God always was seeing me through it. Actually makes me teary. That he was like, I got my eye on you, we're doing this. And so here we are. Just really, I don't know, loving people, I think, is all we do in the end. We share Christ, and if you share Christ, that is loving people. That's it. I gotta get these tears out my face. You think you're giving to people, but really what you don't know is how much you get back. I have notepads sitting beside anywhere that I'm working, and I'm always writing notes of amazing things that people say that bless me and give me strength and encourage me and make the scriptures come alive so I can share it with another person. And that iron sharpening iron, and those letters and those notes and those calls, and donors who support and want to see people be blessed, and those little things and big things all wrapped up together has really been actually just incredible. It felt like God loving me, but it really was people. But it was, you could just see God working in people's life, and it is just a special, special thing. Oh, I can think of this one time I was sitting in my office, in the old office, and somebody was at the front desk, and I could feel their distress. I could feel their anxiety. It's a mom with some young children. You can tell it's bad, whatever's going on. And she's out there at the desk, and financially does not have the ability to be even at the center, but she's here because some friend of the center recommended her. And I hear my staff say, we have donors who want to make sure you get the help that you need. And then I started to meet with that family, and I watched them go from being in that first session all wadded in one chair, all four of them crying and finding hope in that first session. And I watched them walk through a very, very difficult and traumatic and trying season, from coming in just shaking to finally being released, and all of them walking in joy. And the children, what friendships I have with those kids and that mom, and so proud of that mom for what she did, but mostly proud of my donors because they totally made that possible. I think she maybe paid $10, and then the donors picked up the balance, and they changed 4 lives forever. And it was so rewarding because I will never forget, she looked like somebody who was shaking like a leaf. But she walked out knowing that lies were the problem, and that God was going to be for her, and that God would see her through, and she was teaching that to her children. And so you could see it going to another generation. So amazing. And that, there's so many stories, but that's one that always sticks with me because of the dramatic way she walked in initially. How do I get my donors? Well, I send a letter twice a year, and after that, people see the power of the gospel. And when they see the power of the gospel and how it has changed and transformed their life, they want to be a part of it because the love of God has impacted them, and they love people. Donors are people who love people, but don't have the time to meet and do what we do specifically. I'll think of one donor, they're very special to me. They were the first donor that I had. I wasn't really looking for a donor. I was teaching a class. I was teaching a class on marriage, and Sue said to me, "You better get ready to be busy." It terrified me. I was like, ah. And she was so right. She saw that God was doing something special through Life Center, and that he wanted to multiply it. And they sewed into that and have really, behind the scenes, get the credit. You know, without them, this all couldn't have happened. Probably another thing I love about the center is that one person can't do this. An area where I had to grow because I was such an island unto myself, tried to just take care of life on my own. And then God puts me somewhere, back to that Shanghai, where I can't do anything without bringing everybody along on the vision. And so how exciting, and it's so rewarding because they're all equally part of what God is doing here. Well, one of the things I always remember is once upon a time when I started, how it was me and 2 other staff members, and we had 50 people on our waiting list. And then one day I looked around and it was like, oh my goodness, we're meeting 50 people a week. And 50 sessions per week, you know, or more if they're married. And so what a thing. And so I never forget that day where we were slogging it out in faith that God was going to take us into that next thing. Yeah, God, just through perseverance. I had my eye on a prize. I knew that what I was doing was what God told me to do. I knew that it would change lives because the message of Christ in you, the hope of glory, changed my life. I knew that it was hard to discover how. I knew what to do, but how to live from Christ's life was a mystery. And I knew if people understood it, that no matter what walk of life or circumstance, that it would break through and it would bring that healing and freedom to their life, because it did it for me. And there's nothing special about me. I'm just a person in the end. So that would be a top memory. 10 years, where are we going? Well, I'm always looking for people to partner with what God is doing, whether it's at Life Center or back in their churches or their community or their workforce, where they're bringing the message back, where they're sharing the gospel in a simple manner that impacts people, where they're living Christianity instead of always learning it, and living it in such a way that people are captivated with the peace and joy, and they want to learn more about our Jesus and why it's so wonderful. And so I'm always looking and inviting people, and practical ways of doing that really for me is any ministry training. I always see myself meeting with individuals, from now until I die. That's never going to change. And then really reaching out into the community and making ourselves more known. We're a little bit of a secret in the community. And so part of my heart is to launch out and become a little bit more known, so that more people can find Life Center to really find God and God's solutions to and answers to the questions that they have. Because I believe God wants all of us to live a life that we love. And that's not living an indulgent life. It's leading a rewarding life, a life that's got contentment in it, a life that is full of people and memories and love and purpose. That is living at its best. And so I'm just looking for people who want to do that, and I want to expand that and really be obedient to God, what He tells me to do next, even though I'm a little scared after that first Shanghai on what that next thing might be. But if He brought me this far, I'm going to trust Him to bring me the rest of the way. That's my big plan. One of the verses that I have held on to all these years, good times and bad times, is those whose mind are stayed on the Lord are kept in perfect peace. And so when the difficulties of the lack or the uncertainty would come for whatever reason, different variables, when that would come, I would just know, you know what, I'm not to solve this problem. I just keep my eyes on the Lord. And my job is to wait to hear what He tells me and do what He tells me. Not try to solve it, not try to strategize it, not try to avoid it or fix it, but just trust the Lord and keep my mind set on Him, and just keep my hand on the plow and my eyes straight ahead and keep walking. And what I found in the process was that many of those difficulties, they just kind of sloughed off, and they weren't even problems in the first place. And God taught me how to trust Him in a greater measure throughout all this time and still today. But that has helped so much, because in those first days we had lack. I remember one of my secretaries said, "We don't have enough money." And I looked at her, I said, "That's not my problem, and I'm not going to think about that." Which, after what I just said, makes sense to you, but it didn't make sense to her. And so she was perfectly horrified. And I was like, I don't have an answer. All I know is that I'm called here. And if I'm called here, then if my husband, Richard, can take care of me, then how much more Jesus Christ? And He put me here. I'm just going to trust Him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my eye on what I can do and what I was told to do. He didn't tell me to worry about the money. He told me to preach the gospel. And that's it. Such a great verse. What one thing would I want people to take away? I would want them to believe that God has great things for everybody. And if God can use me, hurting, messed up, on a trajectory of self-destruction, if not death, and that God can turn it around, and God can do amazing things through very simple and common people. That's what I would want people to know. And that if your life is hurting and it feels like there's no way out, that's not true. That with God, all things are possible. And that baby steps, if you take baby steps in any one direction long enough, you'll get where you want to be. And that there's people here at the Life Center who would walk with you. That's what I would want people to know.